I never believed that judgment was real. I thought it was a word preachers used to keep people afraid, a threat to make us behave. I lived my life the way I wanted, successful, admired, powerful in my own small world. I had money, respect, even people who called me a leader. And yet, I was empty. I just didn't realize how empty until the day my heart stopped beating. It happened in an instant. One moment I was standing in a boardroom arguing over numbers, and the next, the floor tilted beneath me. A searing pain tore through my chest, and I remember clutching the edge of the table as voices around me blurred. Someone shouted my name. Another called for help. Then everything went silent. Darkness swallowed me, but it wasn't the kind of darkness that felt peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, endless. I could hear echoes, my own voice defending lies, chasing greed, stepping on people's dignity for my own ambition. I saw moments flash before me, not in random order, but in perfect clarity. Times I could have helped and didn't, people I could have forgiven and chose not to. Every moment of selfishness replayed like a confession I never meant to make. Then suddenly, a light broke through. It wasn't far away. It was coming toward me, growing brighter until the darkness couldn't exist beside it. I felt my soul tremble. The light was pure, alive, holy. It wasn't just light, it was a presence. I knew who it was before I saw his face. When Jesus appeared, I fell without meaning to. It wasn't forced. My soul simply couldn't stand upright before him. His presence carried both power and peace, like thunder and a whisper combined. I expected comfort, but what I felt first was truth. Piercing, undeniable truth. He didn't need to say anything. Just standing before him made every hidden motive, every excuse, every secret come to the surface. I saw my life exactly as it was, not how I had pretended it to be. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide, but there was nowhere to go. His eyes, glowing with a love beyond comprehension, looked into me, past my memories, past my image, straight into the core of who I truly was. And I realized something horrifying. He didn't have to condemn me. The truth itself was enough. When he finally spoke, his voice carried both sorrow and authority. "You have built your kingdom on earth," he said, "but what of the kingdom within you?" The words struck me like a hammer to the chest. I had lived for titles, money, recognition, yet standing before him, all of it turned to dust. Nothing mattered except what I had done with the love he'd placed in me, the love I had ignored. I wept. I couldn't stop. And then, through the flood of shame, he said the words that would define everything that followed. "I judge presidents and peasants alike. Before my throne, all are equal." The words echoed through me. I judge presidents and peasants alike. They didn't sound cruel. They sounded eternal, final, absolute. I remember lifting my head slowly, trembling, trying to meet his eyes again. In that light, no title mattered, no position, no wealth, no history. It was just me and what I had done with the life I was given. Then the world around us shifted. I found myself standing in what looked like a vast hall, endless, luminous, yet filled with an almost unbearable silence. It wasn't a courtroom, but it felt like judgment itself lived there. The air shimmered with memory. I realized that what surrounded me were not walls, but moments, my own actions suspended like reflections in glass. Jesus stood beside me, silent, as images began to unfold all around. I saw the woman I had humiliated in a meeting years ago, her face flushed with shame as I made a cruel remark to get a laugh. I saw the beggar I had stepped over outside a hotel lobby, thinking to myself that I didn't have time for people like that. I saw my mother's eyes the day I told her faith was foolish. And then I saw my wife, her tears when she begged me to slow down, to stop letting ambition swallow me whole. I had brushed her off with a smile, telling her success required sacrifice. Each moment burned into me. They weren't just memories. I felt them again. Every careless word, every wound I caused, every cold silence I gave to someone who needed kindness. And worst of all, I could feel what they felt, the pain, the rejection, the disappointment. Jesus wasn't showing me this to torture me. He was letting me see myself as heaven had always seen me. Then the images began to shift. I saw men in suits, leaders, rulers, presidents. Some were known for their power, others for their cruelty, and others for their kindness. Each stood before the same light I now faced. They looked no different from the poor, the broken, the unknown. Each was weighed by the same truth, not what they owned, not what they commanded, but what they had done with love. Jesus turned to me then, and his gaze cut through every illusion I'd ever held about importance. "You see," he said softly, "you measured men by influence. I measure by integrity. You admired success. I honor mercy. You feared failure. I grieve pride." His words carved through me, but strangely, they also healed me, because with every truth came understanding. He wasn't there to destroy me. He was there to awaken me. I looked again at the people being judged, and I saw something beautiful and terrible at once. A man who had ruled nations knelt beside a farmer who had died nameless, both stripped of everything but their souls. And the light, the same light I stood in, passed over them without favoritism, without hesitation. The power that had once divided them meant nothing here. It was then that I understood. In this place there were no great men. There were only hearts, either filled with love or empty of it. I turned to Jesus again and whispered, "So all of us, we stand the same before you?" He nodded once, the faintest sadness in his smile. "You were all given life, breath, and the chance to love. It is what you did with it that remains." The hall trembled slightly, and I knew he was about to show me the part I dreaded most, what my choices had done to others. The light deepened until it felt almost alive, breathing around me. I could sense something about to unfold, something I wasn't ready to face. Jesus lifted his hand, and the images around us began to move again, not like memories this time, but like living rivers. Every word I had ever spoken, every decision I had made, was rippling outward, touching lives I didn't even know existed. At first I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then it hit me. These were the consequences of my life. I watched as a young man, once my employee, sat in his apartment years after I'd fired him out of pride. He was drinking alone, broken, replaying my words, "You'll never make it without me." I saw the despair in his eyes, how that moment of rejection hardened him. I never thought about him again after that day, but now I saw how my arrogance had shaped his pain. Next came a woman I had belittled for her faith, mocking her prayers during a meeting. I thought I'd been witty, clever. But I watched her retreat inward, doubting herself, silencing the joy she once carried. That simple moment, the smirk, the ridicule, had dimmed a light that heaven had once found beautiful. Each ripple showed me how careless pride wounds souls. Every harsh word I threw like a joke became a chain that wrapped around someone's heart. And yet, not all was darkness. Jesus let me see small, forgotten moments, times when I had helped without expecting credit. Once I had paid for a stranger's meal, and years later that man was inspired to start a charity. Another time I had forgiven a friend who betrayed me, and it changed the way he treated his own son. The good rippled, too. I realized then that nothing we do ever disappears. Every act, good or evil, spreads like a wave across eternity. Jesus spoke softly, his eyes never leaving mine. "You lived as though your choices ended with you," he said, "but every life you touched became a seed, either of love or of sorrow. You will see what each one has grown." And I did. The scene expanded into something vast and terrible. I saw generations, people who had never known my name, but were living in the shade of my choices. A word of encouragement I once gave a struggling co-worker had led her to raise her children with faith. A bribe I accepted years later had caused an innocent man to lose his livelihood. Every single action had a lineage. It broke me. I dropped to my knees, shaking, and cried out, "Lord, I didn't know. I didn't know it mattered this much." He knelt beside me, the King of all creation, lowering himself to meet my gaze. "You did know," he said gently. "Every soul knows right from wrong, but the world teaches you to measure gain instead of grace." His hand rested on my shoulder, and I felt both love and truth burning together. "Now you see, Daniel," he said, "why I judge presidents and peasants alike, for the weight of one soul is equal to the weight of all." The moment he said it, I saw countless faces, rich and poor, famous and forgotten, all connected in one golden thread that led back to him. And then, for the first time, I understood how heaven measures a life, not by crowns or titles, but by the love that remains when everything else is stripped away. The light around us shifted again, softer now but deeper, like the air itself was made of understanding. Jesus looked at me, and I knew the next revelation wouldn't be about what I had done, but why I had done it. I braced myself. He raised his hand slightly, and scenes unfolded, moments I had once been proud of, awards I'd received, speeches I'd given about charity, leadership, justice. Crowds had clapped, cameras had flashed. I used to replay those memories to remind myself that I was a good man, but in the presence of his truth, those moments trembled and changed. The light that had once seemed golden turned dull and gray, and I understood why. Jesus didn't accuse me. He didn't need to. Just seeing it through his eyes was enough. I had done so much good for myself. I gave to charity for the applause. I helped the poor so I could sleep easier. I forgave when it made me look noble. Every good thing I had done was stained by pride, by the quiet voice in my heart that always whispered, "What will they think of me?" I felt shame crawl through me, and I said, "Lord, even the good I did was wrong?" He shook his head slowly. The act itself was not wrong, but the motive mattered. Love gives without remembering. Pride gives and keeps count. The world praises what I cannot. Those words sank into me like fire. I saw other people now, leaders, pastors, politicians, even ordinary men and women. Some of their deeds blazed like sunlight because they came from genuine love. Others glittered for a moment, then faded into ash. In this place there were no illusions. Everything false simply dissolved in his presence. And then he showed me something that broke me completely. I saw a poor old woman sweeping the floor of a small church. Her hands were cracked, her back bent with age. No one had ever noticed her. No one even knew her name. But as she worked, she whispered prayers, simple, selfless prayers for strangers she would never meet. Her light shone brighter than kings. Jesus looked at me and said, "She gave what she had with a pure heart. You gave what you had for your own glory. Tell me, Daniel, who is the greater in the kingdom of heaven?" I couldn't answer. I just cried. Not because he shamed me, but because he loved me enough to show me the truth. It wasn't condemnation. It was correction, the kind that strips away lies until only the soul remains. Then he said something that carved itself into my heart. You learned to perform goodness, but not to live it. You loved approval more than people. But I have not called you to be admired. I have called you to be authentic. I fell to my knees again, trembling. Can such a heart be fixed? I asked. He smiled, and his eyes glowed with such mercy that I felt hope stir where there had only been despair. That, he said, is why I brought you here. The light grew warmer, and I sensed we were about to go somewhere else, somewhere even deeper, a place not of judgment, but of understanding. The light surrounding us began to expand until the hall of personal judgment dissolved entirely. I felt myself being lifted, not by force but by awareness. It was as if every heartbeat carried me higher until I stood looking over something vast and living, the story of humanity itself. Jesus was beside me, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You have seen the heart of one man. Now you will see the heart of nations." Before me stretched an ocean of people, generations upon generations, moving like waves. Kings, presidents, soldiers, mothers, children, beggars, builders, all flowing together through history. I could see the rise and fall of civilizations, the way laws were made, how wars began, how mercy was forgotten and rediscovered again. It wasn't like watching a movie, it was like standing inside the memory of the world. I saw nations that once knelt before God stand up in pride and crumble. I saw others built in humility rise to greatness, not by power, but by compassion. Every empire that valued gold more than grace eventually turned to dust. Every society that honored truth and mercy became a beacon for others. It was all there, every cause, every effect, every pattern of our arrogance and our redemption. Jesus' voice broke through the vision. You have always believed that power governs history, but I tell you, it is mercy that decides its fate. The words shook me. I looked again and saw leaders I recognized, presidents, ministers, rulers, standing before him just as I had. Some glowed with light that flowed outward from their humility. Others were dim, their power meaningless here. Titles disappeared, crowns dissolved. There were no flags, no borders, only souls being weighed by love. He turned to me and said, I do not count wealth or weapons, I count compassion. A nation is judged by how it treats the least of its people, the stranger, the poor, the forgotten. When love dies, a nation begins to die with it. I watched as a city appeared below, glittering with towers. Inside, people hurried past each other, everyone chasing more, never looking up. Then a small act, a child offering food to a homeless man, rippled outward. I saw it change the man's life, then his son's, then generations later it inspired a movement of kindness that reached thousands, all from one child. I turned to Jesus, amazed. Even that small act, it mattered? He nodded. Every act of mercy becomes a seed in eternity. When you love, you build forever. And then his expression grew sorrowful. But when nations forget love, they invite their own ruin. I do not destroy. They destroy themselves by what they choose to worship. I saw then the tragedy of history, how humanity repeated the same mistakes, greed, division, indifference. Yet through it all, threads of light ran like veins through the darkness. People who chose compassion when the world demanded cruelty. They were the true builders of every lasting kingdom. Jesus looked out over it all, and I felt his grief more than I can describe. The judgment of nations, he said, is not written in the stars. It is written in hearts. When enough hearts turn cold, the world trembles, but even then, mercy waits for the smallest spark. I fell silent, overwhelmed by the scale of it all. For the first time, I saw how even the smallest soul could tilt the balance of the world toward light or shadow. Then he said, "Now you understand the measure I use. Presidents and peasants alike, every life, every heart, every nation, all are weighed by love." And then the vision began to fade, and I sensed he was about to show me something even more personal, the cost of that love. The light dimmed until only one radiance remained ahead of me, a single beam, blazing and alive. I felt my soul being pulled toward it, trembling with both fear and longing. Jesus stood beside me, his expression solemn, his eyes reflecting that light like fire and mercy woven together. "You have seen how I judge," he said softly. "Now I will show you why I can." The light expanded, and suddenly I was standing at the foot of the cross. It wasn't an image or a symbol. It was real. The air carried the scent of dust, blood, and sorrow. The sky above was dark. Trembling as if creation itself was in pain, I heard the hammering, the terrible sound of metal striking wood, and each blow felt like it was striking my heart. And then I saw him, Jesus, hanging there, his body torn, his face streaked with blood and sweat, yet his eyes still filled with love. I fell to my knees, weeping uncontrollably. I couldn't stand before that kind of love, the love that bled for me, for everyone. I cried out, "Lord, why are you showing me this? I can't bear it." He answered, not from beside me this time, but from the cross itself. His voice came through the agony, still steady, still kind. "Because this is where judgment and mercy met," he said. "Every lie, every cruelty, every sin of every soul, presidents and peasants alike, was weighed here." As he spoke, I saw rivers of darkness flowing from humanity, hate, pride, greed, violence, all pouring into him. I realized that he had carried every consequence I'd witnessed earlier, every chain, every wound, every tear. And as that darkness touched him, it didn't stain him. It died. Tears blurred my vision. "You took it all," I whispered. "All of it." He nodded weakly, yet even in his suffering there was strength. "Yes," he said, "so that you would know that love is not weakness. It is justice fulfilled." I saw light burst from his wounds, pure, unstoppable, holy. It flowed out over the earth, touching faces and generations I had seen earlier in judgment. The same people who had fallen, failed, or destroyed. His light reached them all. Some turned toward it and lived. Others turned away, blinded by pride. But the offer was there for all. Jesus looked at me again, now standing in glory beside the cross, radiant and alive. "Do you understand now?" he asked. I shook my head, still crying. "I think I do." "You don't judge to punish. You judge to restore." He smiled, a smile that felt like sunrise after endless night. "Yes," he said, "but love cannot heal what will not be exposed to its light. That is why truth must come before mercy." Those words burned into me. Truth before mercy, love before power, grace before greatness. Then he extended his hand toward me once more. "Come," he said. "There is one more thing you must see before you return." I took his hand, and the cross behind him faded, replaced by a soft horizon of gold. I could sense we were moving toward something vast, something final. The golden horizon widened until it became an endless expanse. At its center flowed a river unlike any I had ever seen, clear as crystal, yet alive with light. Its current carried voices, memories, songs, and sorrow all at once. Jesus and I stood at its edge, and he said quietly, This is the river that runs between what is mortal and what is eternal. Every soul crosses it. The air shimmered, and suddenly I saw them. People, countless people, stepping into the water. Some sank quickly, weighed down by shadows that clung to them. Others floated upward, light pouring from their hearts. There were no crowns, no rags, no rich or poor, only souls meeting the truth of who they had become. I watched a powerful ruler wade in first. His face was proud, defiant. The light reached toward him, but he turned away, clutching a crown that dissolved in his hands. Then a woman followed, frail and forgotten by the world, whispering prayers. The river seemed to rise around her like gentle hands, lifting her into the light. I turned to Jesus, my heart pounding. "Why do some sink and others rise?" He looked at the river, his expression both tender and grave. "Because love is lighter than pride," he said. "Those who learn to love find that nothing binds them. Those who worshipped only themselves carry their own chains." As I watched, I recognized faces: a president, a beggar, a mother, a murderer. All stood equal here. The river didn't judge them. It revealed them. The light didn't choose favorites. It simply revealed truth. Those who embraced it rose. Those who feared it sank. Then I saw something that made me tremble, my own reflection standing at the edge. I could see my entire life in the water. The pride, the ambition, the small acts of kindness I'd forgotten. The light approached me like an embrace, and I hesitated. What if there were still shadows in me? What if I wasn't worthy? Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. "No one is worthy apart from my mercy," he said, "but every soul can choose it." I stepped forward, and the water touched my feet. It wasn't cold, it was alive. Every memory, every hidden thought surfaced. For a moment, I saw all the faces I had hurt. But then I saw him again on the cross, and the guilt that once crushed me began to dissolve. The water lifted me until I stood face to face with him once more. Tears filled my eyes. "So this is judgment," I whispered. He nodded. "It is truth and love meeting at once. The truth reveals, the love restores." The river glowed brighter, and I saw more souls crossing. Some wept with joy, others wept with regret. Yet even in their sorrow I sensed hope, because in his presence nothing was wasted. Jesus turned to me, and his voice carried both command and compassion. "You must go back and tell them," he said. "Tell them that I judge not to condemn, but to awaken. Tell them that no one escapes my gaze, not the powerful, not the poor, but neither can anyone escape my love." The river's light began to fade, and I felt that familiar pull again, the tug of gravity, of flesh and heartbeat. I realized he was sending me back. "Will I see you again?" I asked, desperate. He smiled, radiant and endless. "You will see me in every act of love, in every mercy shown. When you love, I am there." The world around me dissolved, and I felt myself falling back toward the sound of machines, voices, breath, life. The sound of the machines hit me first, the beeping, the murmuring voices, the sudden rush of people around me. My lungs burned as air flooded back in. I gasped, and a nurse shouted, "He's awake!" Hands pressed against my wrist, my neck, my chest. I could feel the weight of the world returning, the heaviness of gravity, of flesh, of time. I blinked at the ceiling lights, still half expecting to see that river of light above me. But all I saw were faces, worried, amazed, exhausted. Someone said I'd been gone for nearly 10 minutes. But I knew what they couldn't. I had crossed eternity in those 10 minutes. For days I said nothing. I just lay there, staring out the window, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still feel his hand on my shoulder, still hear his voice echoing through my soul. I judge presidents and peasants alike. It haunted me, not in fear, but in truth. I had always believed influence protected me, that wealth and power meant control. But standing before him, all of it had turned to vapor. Titles, fame, status, reputation, none of it had weight. Only love had weight. Only mercy endured. When I finally spoke, my voice cracked. "He sees everything," I told the nurse. "Not just what we do, but why we do it." She looked at me strangely, but I didn't mind. I wasn't speaking for her. I was speaking for every soul who believed they could outrun judgment or buy their way past grace. Weeks later, when I returned home, everything looked different. I walked past people on the street, janitors, executives, homeless men, children, and I couldn't stop seeing light flickering inside them. Some dim, some bright, but all the same kind of light, the same kind he showed me. I realized then what he meant. Every person carries a piece of eternity, no matter how small their world looks. I couldn't keep it to myself. I began to tell my story, not for attention, but because I owed it to him. I told it in churches, in hospitals, even in quiet conversations with strangers. I told them about the hall of deeds, the river of truth, the cross that swallowed judgment in mercy. Some believed, some didn't. But that didn't matter. My task was not to convince, it was to testify. Now, every morning I wake up with the same prayer. Lord, help me love the way you measure love. It's not easy. I fail often. Pride creeps back in. Anger still finds me. But every time it does, I remember the light, the same light that leveled kings and lifted beggars. I know now that one day I'll stand there again, not as a man who once died, but as a soul returning home. And when I do, I won't bring titles or excuses. I'll bring only love. Because in the end, before the throne of the one who died for all, that's all that survives. And his words, his eternal, equal, burning words, will echo through the ages. I judge presidents and peasants alike, and I love them all the same.